everyone. I want to share with you out of First Chronicles chapter 4. So First Chronicles talks about descendants and who's related to who. And there's this one nugget in verse 9, which I thought was pretty cool because it introduces us to somebody from the Bible that we've written books about, talked about, have sermons about. But God doesn't waste words. So I think there's a really important reason why it's right in the beginning of this chapter. So verse 9 out of 1 Chronicles chapter 4 says, Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. And his mother called his name Jabez, saying, because I bore him in pain. Now, right before that verse, it doesn't say who is related to Jabez or where he came from. It's just right smack in there in verse 9. And I thought that was pretty cool because then it goes on in verse 10 and it says, Jabez called upon the God of Israel, saying, oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my border, and that your hand might be with me, and that you would keep me from harm, so that it might not bring me pain. Really cool part of this verse. I mean, it's all cool, but the last part of this verse is really cool because it says, and God granted what he asked. So here's Jabez. He was born in pain. So his mom was in pain when he bore him. And his name actually means sorrow, to grieve, and just painful. So here he is. He had no option. He had no choice, right? His mom gave him that name. So here he is. His name literally means to grieve and to be sorrowful. So then, when we look at who he was, the Bible says he was honored. So he was more honorable than his brothers. So that word honor in there, it means to be honored, heavy with honor. So not just honored, but like heavy with honor. And enjoying honor, and to be made abundant. So God made him an honorable man. He was chasing the things of God. Now, we don't know every single detail of his life or how he had a relationship with God or what that was like, but we can see from verse 9 and verse 10 that he was dedicated to God and he had honor. He was honorable. So when you look at verse 10 and he's asking God, please bless me. So verse 10, when it says bless, it's the Hebrew word barak. And what it means, it's when you look at the grammatical aspect of it, it's actually, it expresses an action. So bless is an action in that verse. And it means an intentional action. So he's not only asking God to bless him, but he's also expecting an intentional act from God to bless him. So also when some translations it says me indeed, like please do it, or me indeed. And that verse, me indeed, that part of that phrase I should say, it emphasizes the action above, which is the action of blessing. So what's really cool is that Jabez is asking God to bless him, but he's asking God in a way that he knows God's going to do that for him. So he has faith. He knows that his God, the God of Israel, is going to come through for him. So there's no doubt in his mind. So also, we see that word enlarge. So he's asking God to enlarge his borders. So we also see that happening in Exodus chapter 34, verse 24. So let's go there for a second and let's read that verse because it uses the same word enlarge. So chapter 34, verse 24 says, for I will cast out nations. So this is God, right? For I will cast out nations before you and enlarge your borders. No one shall covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times in the year. So this whole chapter 34 in Exodus, is all about Moses making new tablets, the new covenant, what God is saying. So God's telling his people he's going to enlarge their borders. So he's going to expand their territory and pretty much taking care of all their enemies. We also see that in Isaiah chapter 54, verse 2, it uses the same type of word, enlarge, in there. And Isaiah 54, verse 2 actually says, enlarge the place of your tent, and let the curtains of your habitations be stretched out. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. And then it goes on in verse 3 and it says, for you will spread abroad to the right and to the left, and your offspring will possess the nations. So God is promising that he's going to enlarge your tent, enlarge your capacity to receive what he has for you, enlarging your borders. So we see the same word enlarge in all these verses, right? So it means to really extend your tent and extend your territory. So when we look at the word hand, it means strength, God's strength and God's power. So you don't have to do it out of your own strength. It's God's power that does that for you. And he also says, Jabez, back to that verse, he says, be with me and that you would keep me. So that actually means to act with effect. So he's asking God, please be with me, but not just be with me, but keep me. There's a difference, right? Be with me, like you're with me right now, but also keep me, like hold me, okay? And that I may not grieve, right? So he's saying, I know that my name means literally to grieve, but please wipe that off of me, right? I don't want to be known for grieving. I want to be known because you love me and because I'm chasing after you, after your presence. So then that last part of the verse, it says God granted that to him, right? So it means to lead in and carry in and bring near. So how cool is that? That at the end of that verse, God is literally carrying him, leading him in, and he's granting everything that he asked for, everything that Jabez was asking God to do. Like God swooped him up, carried him, and led him into the place that he had for him. So 3 different points here, right? So how does God see Jabez, right? So his mom saw Jabez as like pain and sorrow and just grieving, right? But Jabez didn't want that label on him, right? It says he called out to God. So whenever we walk around life and people give us names or labels that we're like, that doesn't sound right, or we know in our hearts it's not right, or even mean names, right? We know that's not who we are, because what matters is what God calls you. And we get to call out to God too, because we have that connection with him. So being honorable in spite of what Jabez's mother called him, right? So even though he was called this name of grieving, he refused that name and he was an honorable man. So it doesn't matter what people call you or what name they give you. What matters is what God calls you, right? Number 2 is Jabez called on God, right? So he had a connection. He had a relationship with him. He also acknowledged, he was aware that God was with him. So same thing, how we can apply this to our lives is knowing, being aware that God is with us, and what matters is what he calls us, period. It's whatever he calls us to be, right? And then 3, knowing that God blesses you. It's an action. And he also keeps you, he carries you, and he leads you in to extend those territories. He enlarges your tent. He enlarges your borders. He tells you where to go. And you don't have to strive to do any of that. All you have to do is obey out of love, stay connected to him, and listen to what he's saying about you.